Okay, we are live. Hello, everyone. So, if you're in the lounge, if you're watching there, drop me a message in the chat and say hello just before we get started. And a couple of technical hindrances as I was getting set up there. So, apologies for the slight delay with the start. But yeah, drop a message and say hello, and we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. We got Ferenc there. Hello, Ferenc. Hi, Andrea. Great to see you guys tuned in. Got some good topics for you today. Hello, the doll. Nice to see you. Hey, Marco. Got a good turnout at the moment. Looking good. I like it. Hello, Bejan Alpha 4. Nice to see you. All right. So, folks, let's get started. So, first of all, I hope you are all doing well, that you've had a good summer up to now. It's been very warm in Madrid, as I've said probably multiple times over the past few streams that I've done, both the members stream and the last live stream. The temperatures keep staying very high, like in the mid 30s, so very difficult to go out. Got the chance to travel a little bit last month as well, so we went to Andorra. You guys will have seen the video on that. And there's a couple of other places we visited as well with videos that'll come out over the next month or two. So you'll see what I got up to this summer, and I've got some interesting content for you, and I'm excited to share it with you. So on that, yeah, just to bring you guys up to speed with the content that I put out recently, in case you haven't seen it. So the last video obviously was about the trip to Andorra. So a very interesting place. It was my first time going there. I really enjoyed it. Good to have a look around. The nature in Andorra is incredible. Very nice scenery, very relaxing as well. So if you haven't been, definitely recommend you going and checking it out if you haven't been there already. Also, if you're an investor and an entrepreneur, maybe you've heard about some of the tax benefits that are available in Andorra as well. It has a very low income tax system. It's been a very popular place for Spanish YouTubers to go and set up their streaming businesses to avoid some of the higher rates of taxation that they pay in Spain. So yeah, Andorra, interesting from that perspective. So I talk all about that in the video in more detail, talked about my experience in Andorra. So do check that out. Put out a couple of podcast episodes as well recently. So we had an episode with a British expat called Lamide Elizabeth. She was born and grew up in the UK, and then has lived and worked in Dubai, and is currently in South Africa, or at least the last time we spoke, she was in South Africa. And so we talked a little bit about how she has built her wealth across these three countries, how she got to where she was, and why she's diversified in such a way, what she sees in each country that she finds interesting. That was a really great conversation as well. And for those of you who are interested in Spain, I put out a podcast episode earlier this week where I talked with a lady called Mikel from the United States originally, who has traveled around the world as a digital nomad. She's visited about 36 different countries, and then finally she chose to settle down in Spain. She chose Valencia, and so we look in detail how she built her business, how others who are interested in doing the same can build their digital nomad business, and then essentially why she chose Valencia out of all the places that she's visited in the world. And then yeah, got some more interesting topics in upcoming videos coming for you as well, ranging from news about Spain, opinion videos, and as I mentioned, travel videos as well. So that's what's been going on kind of in the content space. Now, those of you that follow me on Instagram, you would have seen in my story that I have some important news for travelers coming to the EU who are non-EU travelers. So let's get right into that now. And basically the news is, many of you may be aware that the EU has been looking to implement a new border system, essentially, and it's composed of two components. The first being the entry-exit system, the EES, and the second component being the ETIAS, the electronic travel authorization entry system into the EU, essentially. Similar to that of like the ESTA that you have when you travel to the United States. So the news essentially is that the entry-exit system is expected to be implemented this year from the 10th of November. So let me just tell you what you need to know about the new entry-exit system. So basically, it will be used in all of the EU member states, with the exception of Ireland. Excuse me, with the exception of Ireland and Cyprus, which are non-Schengen countries. So if you're traveling to Ireland or Cyprus, you'll still have your passport stamped. You'll also see this system used in 4 non-EU, but EEA or Schengen countries, in the case of Switzerland, which is one of them, and the other 3 being Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. So if you go into any of those countries, those 4 that I just mentioned, and then the 25 EU member states that are not Ireland and Cyprus, then this is important to know because this is a new entry-exit system, which is expected to come in from the 10th of November this year. What this system essentially does is it replaces the need for passport stamping. It's all part of the EU's border upgrade to modernize the entry-exit, tracking who comes in and out of the EU and how long people have been staying there. So what does it involve? It essentially involves your face being photographed when you arrive, your fingerprints being taken as well, along with when you pass your biometric passport or non-biometric passport, either through the scanner or when you present it to the border guard. So it will essentially, they'll have your details on file. They'll know when you've entered. They'll be able to verify that it's you with your passport and with the Face ID. And that way they'll be tracking visitors into the EU, how long they stay, where they enter, where they exit, all those kind of things. It's important to note that this system is, it's mainly for travelers coming to the EU. So if you're from the United Kingdom, for example, the United States, and you're visiting the EU, just as like a tourist, just as a visitor, then you are going to be going through this ETIAS system. It's not applicable if you're an EU national. So say you're living in France, for example, you're coming to Spain, it's not going to apply to you. Or if you're an EU national, let's say you're French, you're living in the United States, you're coming to Spain, you're not going to be subject to the ETIAS system because you're an EU national. It's also not applicable for non-EU nationals who have residency status in the EU already. So someone like myself, for example, who is a resident in Spain, I'm a non-EU national, I'm from the UK, but because I have a residency card in Spain, I won't be subject to the ETIAS system as long as I present my residency card while I'm there. There's a few other exceptions in the list as well as to who doesn't have to go through like the ETIAS system as well. So I'll send the link. I'll send the link to you guys in the chat so that if you want to have a look into how it works and everything, then you can see how the entry-exit system works. I'm going to send this to you guys over the chat. By the way, don't forget to ask any questions you have whilst watching as well, guys. There is a bit of a delay between the video and the chat. I think it's about 20-30 seconds. So I'm a little bit ahead of what I see in the chat, but I will always stop and come back to the questions. So whilst you're coming up with your questions on the EES, the second part of the EU's border upgrade is the ETIAS system. So that's kind of like, as I was saying earlier, how the US has the ESTA visa waivers for a number of countries. The EU is going to implement a similar system, which will cost about €7, so about £6 British or about $8 American for visitors. Again, there's similar countries. There's a list. Actually, I'll go and I'll show you the list. So I have it somewhere. The list of countries that, there we go. So I'm going to share my screen in the stream now so that you can see who is subject to the ETIAS system. So there's 30 European countries that you'll see that are requiring the ETIAS authorization when you enter. It's been said, I was watching a BBC video on the topic. They said that the authorization was almost, very quickly in most cases, where, it's a straightforward application. There's no, you don't have a criminal record or things like that. Should be a fairly straightforward thing. So you can see here's a list of countries that need the ETIAS authorization. So you see the likes of United Kingdom, United States, we got Canada in there as well, Australia, countries that basically have, visa-free access to the EU to stay within a 180-day period. Nationals of these countries who are traveling, not residents in the EU, will need to apply for the ETIAS travel authorization before entering the Schengen area or the EU. And so other people that don't necessarily need it is kind of the group of people I mentioned before. So it actually highlights here on the website, it says British nationals. So you will need an ETIAS travel authorization if you're a UK national for a short-term stay in a 90 to 180-day period. But it says here as well, so people who are beneficiaries of the withdrawal agreement, that's people who were residents legally in an EU member state prior to the end of the Brexit transition period at the end of 2020, are exempt from the ETIAS travel system as well. So those are kind of the key things that you need to keep in mind with this new visa system. So it's essentially coming into effect this year, the first part being the entry-exit system. And then the second part next year, expected around May time for the ETIAS part of the system. There's apparently a 6-month grace period for people. So once it's implemented, if you go to the EU, then you won't necessarily have to have the ETIAS for the first 6 months. Like if you forget, for example, you have a 6-month grace period, but then after those 6 months, it will be absolutely compulsory and you wouldn't be able to get in without the authorization. So coming to the questions now. So Bajan Alpha, I'm glad that I was able to pronounce your username correctly first. Residency card as in the TA? Yes, the TA is kind of your tarjeta y identidad extranjero. So that's kind of on your TA, it has your residency status. So if you have in Spain, of course, they're biometric. So you'll be able to, you'll present it to the border guard and that will be your proof of residency in the EU. Whether you're entering through Spain, through another EU country, you have proof of residence in the EU and you shouldn't have to, do anything with regards to the entry-exit system or ETIAS. The doll, what is the most gentrified city overall, would you say, in Spain? That's a very challenging question to answer. I'm gonna, think about where I see the most new build properties. And it's a very difficult one because they're all around Spain. There is a lot of new build. I hear of a lot in Madrid, obviously, because I'm here, and Barcelona as well. And then you hear of, projects that are coming up in like Malaga, the south of Spain, Valencia, Alicante. And it's difficult to quantify, I guess, what is gentrification and what is not necessarily gentrification, because, you see them in all different parts of the city. Whether it's the center of Madrid, whether it's on the outskirts, I think it's difficult to qualify what is gentrification in that respect. But there is new build properties around the city. One thing that I actually thought about discussing on this live, which we can maybe do in a future one, is about kind of some of the big hotel chains like Marriott, for example. They are introducing kind of luxury, like residency, like luxury residencies essentially. So it's like, a building called, Marriott or Pullman or whatever. And it's like living space. It's like apartments, but it's kind of giving you like the hotel experience in there. So you got like services and all that kind of stuff. So I think this is an interesting development. I wanted to look into it a little bit more before I started to talk about it on here. But I think, this could be, it's not gentrification, as you say, but it'd be very interesting to see how this impacts the property market going forward in some of the big cities where there might be demand for these kind of products like residencies. Obviously targeted at like very high-end consumers, like high net worth individuals and wealthy people. Okay. So keep your questions coming, guys. Hi, Chinedu, I see your question just came through there. So what are the things that need to do to be renewed as a foreigner aside the TA? Do you need to renew the town hall registration, social security, or the hospital card? So if you're a resident as a foreigner, you got a TA, that's kind of your proof of residence. So the padrón, which is the town hall registration, you essentially only need to update that if ever your address changes. So if you're registered in one address at the town hall and you stay there for 5-10 years, then it's simply, that's your address. That's where you're registered. You might need to bring out like a new copy from time to time if you're doing like administrative procedures. Let's say they want a recent copy of your padrón. You can download that typically from your town hall's website. In Madrid, you can download it electronically. I think in the town where I live as well. So one way or another, from the town hall website or through the online systems, you should find a way where you can just download that again. Social security number kind of stays with you for life as well. I was assigned a social security number back in 2017. Yeah, and it stayed with me for life. So these kind of things, they just kind of stay. So your padron, you only need to update it if you move address. Your TA will need renewing. It depends on what kind you have. Like if it's a temporary residency, it will be every 5 years. Or rather, at the 5th year, your temporary residency would expire and you would be eligible possibly to go into a permanent status. So you'd need to renew your TA there. And then if you have a permanent residence, then it's typically every 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, that you renew your TA. Other visa types like the NLV, the digital nomad visa, I understand the renewals for these are more frequent. I think it's maybe every year in some cases. So it's important to understand what kind of residency you're on to know like when you need to update your, renew it. Update it is only really if you change address, like in the case of, like the padron. So if I'm in the middle of, let's say I'm on the 3rd year of my 5-year temporary residency and I move address, I just need to update the address on my residency card. I get to my 5 years and then I update it to whatever, like a permanent residence, for example. So I hope that answered that question. So if it's up to 90 days to get the digital nomad visa, what's the average wait time on the TA? So we talked about this actually, the doll, in the last podcast episode with Mikkel. And we also talked about it in a video I did with Marina, a lawyer from bureaucracy.es, a firm that I partner with on digital nomad visa applications. So for the majority of non-EU nationals that apply for the digital nomad visa, you do need to be in Spain when you make the application. And it can be the case that, it takes longer than those 90 days. But if your application's in progress, then you can leave Spain, but you need like an authorization to do it. It's called like a regreso, which you can ask for. I think it's an extranjería where you can ask for that. But probably if you're going through that process, it's probably not advisable to leave Spain and probably just stay in there. But if you have like an application in progress for residency status to regularize your situation, then I understand that you maybe can go over those 90 days, but I'm not sure. I don't want to be quoted on that. So if you are thinking of going for the digital nomad visa and you're looking at how to apply it, I will leave the link for bureaucracy in the chat again, in case you want to reach out to a lawyer. They offer a free 20-minute consultation to understand your situation so that you can, determine whether the digital nomad visa is something for you. So I've just put that link in the chat and they'll be able to clarify that more for you. And Beijan, if you have another question, I'd be interested in a video about neighborhoods in different cities that have newer builds. That's a good idea as well. So I talked about another kind of crowdfunding real estate investment platform that exists in Spain called Urbanite. And these guys are often putting out new projects around the country. I've seen them, there's a lot in Madrid. I've seen a couple in Alicante, Valencia. I've seen projects in Malaga, even saw one in Burgos, which is kind of north, not all the way to the north coast, but between Madrid and San Sebastian, for example. So what I can maybe do, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, I can maybe, a video where we look through some of those projects and maybe even explain the platform as well. So you can get an idea of where some of these newer build projects are coming up. Because I think that might be interesting to look at as well. Great questions, guys. Thank you all for asking questions. I do have one more thing to share with you before get on to the final part of the live stream. So I'm going to share my screen again. And this is related to self-storage. Those of you that follow the channel, you've watched my videos, you know that I have a couple of self-storage investments here. And I was looking through a País the other day, and basically I found a really interesting article. So I'm going to share that now with you guys. So the title here, it says, the other illegal life of self-storage that annoys neighbors. From marijuana plantations to yoga classes. So, like self-storage in Spain, it has a very clear use. it's to store objects and goods. But as this article is saying, there's people who, take it a different way and do all kinds of stuff that you shouldn't really be doing with storage units. So the story it talks about in here, it talks about one where, they've just, there was a funny smell coming from the basement of the building where there were the storage units, and they discovered, it was being used to grow illegal substances. That's one example. The other example they talk about is that in a building where there were storage units, I think a lady had a large storage unit essentially. And when the receptionist of the building, like the guy who's on the door basically, wasn't there, she would use her storage unit to host yoga classes, and run like an entire business with loads of people in there, which, in a storage unit facility and like a building where there's people living as well, it's not really what you're supposed to do. So I thought the interesting thing here to talk about was kind of, how do you prevent these kind of situations coming up? Because it is an interesting one, and it's something that I always asked myself, like when I was investing in storage units. So the first thing is that when you purchase a storage unit, like if there is a comunidad, like a group of neighbors, and it's been established and decreed, then normally there should be a set of general rules and guidelines for a storage unit, like what you can and can't use the storage unit for. Like one of the obvious common ones that might surprise some people, but is, always there, is like, you're not allowed to live in the storage unit. You're not allowed to sleep overnight in the storage unit. You're not allowed to store maybe certain goods, certain hazardous goods. You're obviously not allowed to use it to conduct like illegal businesses like that. So normally there should be some kind of like guidelines laid out by the comunidad to say, this is what's acceptable, this is not acceptable with these storage units, what you can use it for. And then obviously as an owner, if you're an owner, it's on you to do that. But if you're like me and you rent out the storage units, then, it passes on to, this is my storage unit, but my tenant could be using it to do stuff that's not allowed. So how do you prevent that? So you can put it basically in the contract. Like if there is a set of guidelines set out by the community, then essentially making a clause that says, per the guidelines, the rules of the community, you're not allowed to do X, Y, or Z, or, you must follow these at all times. And if there's not, which is, it's not ideal, it's not recommendable, probably first I would speak to the leader of the comunidad to say, we need to get some rules in place. But of course, you could also set out, specific clauses by the contract as well when you get there. So, interesting article. I thought I'd share it with you guys just because I think it's, it's quite amusing. It was quite amusing for me. I'm sure it probably was for you guys as well when you learned about it. And so, yeah, so a real, so I thought I'd share my perspective on that. Okay, so more questions have come in the meantime. So, hey Kareem, great to see that you're enjoying the videos, and I wish you all the best for your move to Cala de Mijas from Berlin. I'm sure you'll enjoy the change of scenery a lot. Cala de Mijas, I've seen 1 or 2 photos here and there, and it looks amazing. So I hope you have a great time. Okay, so Dol, so if I want to purchase a home in Spain, realistically, how long would I have to build credit before I get considered for a mortgage as a digital nomad? This is a great question, and the answer is quite interesting. I think you'll be surprised that in Spain there is no formal like credit rating system like there is in the likes of the UK and the US. You don't have a credit score as such. In Spain, what they're more interested in when it comes to the mortgage is your solvency. They're more interested in, can this person like pay the loan off for the duration, and is there a risk that, we're going to have to take the house back from them? That's why you see scenarios where it's often, like at least 20% down on a property in Spain. In the case of non-residents, it can be higher, like 30, 40. I think in extreme cases, maybe even 50. But solvency really is the key thing. Like you can be in, you could have like all the savings in the world, but if you don't have enough, income to cover the monthly amount of the mortgage, then they're not going to look at you. The only thing they really have to kind of track credit is like we'll call them blacklists, because I think, it's difficult to translate from Spanish. It's like the ficha de morosos, which is like people who are in debt or have an unpaid debt. Which is within the Bank of Spain. So they have like lists like the ASNEF, all these kind of things. And the Bank of Spain as well knows like what kind of debt you might have in your person. Like, for example, when I applied for my mortgage, I had a question about what is, a certain amount of debt, which I didn't recognize at all, but it turns out like it might just be credit card spent. And as long as you're on top of your debt, you don't, you're not on any blacklists or anything like that. Yeah, you're solving, you got a good profile, then it shouldn't stop you from getting a mortgage. Now, as a digital nomad, it's obviously a bit of a different profile. Like the ideal profile in Spain, for like the banks is like number one is like what's known as a funcionario, so a civil servant, because they have like ultimate job stability in terms of, job security. Then someone, who's been working for a company for a long time, the longer you've worked for them, the better. And then third, kind of at the bottom of the pack, unfortunately, is like the freelancers and the autonomous, where it's not impossible, but it is considerably more difficult. So that's kind of the order of preference in the banks. Now, of course, it's not impossible, but just things that you do need to keep in mind. So I'd say the keys to mortgage success is like proving that you're solvent, that you have a good amount of savings to put down on a property, and yeah. So I hope that answers your question, and I wish you good luck if you're willing to go through that process. Hey Joan, I'm glad that you were able to join the live stream as well. Great to hear that you're interested in that kind of video, Bayesian Alpha. A video about learning Spanish while in Spain. So actually, yeah, that could be an interesting one as well. Myself, so I kind of taught myself Spanish. Like I spoke Spanish before I moved to Spain. And kind of just through listening to music, watching TV, all that kind of stuff. I don't want to brag, but because I really like languages, I do, and I have like found them typically quite easy. The process for me, it was much more enjoyable and much more straightforward, and it got me up to a level, not quickly. It did take a few years to get to where I am today, but to get to like a decent level to be able to survive in Spain, I got there quite quickly. That said, that's not to say that nobody, like, I'm the only one that can do this. Of course, if you really put the time in, you're really interested, then you can definitely learn Spanish as well. And just the fact of being in the country obviously just makes a whole load of difference as well. So immersing yourself with Spanish, speaking Spanish, just even speaking to like someone in the street, like asking how do I get here instead of looking on Google Maps, asking like where can I find X item in the supermarket. All these are little things that like, you're scared, you're nervous when you're first learning a language, but they can help you, get over that initial barrier, and help you build your confidence and feel more comfortable using the language. And the more comfortable, the more confident you feel, then the better it gets. So I'll consider that as a video topic as well, learning Spanish while in Spain. Okay, so we got some others. So Kareem, so how to look at renting properties when they're all majorly on the reb for the short term? Did you experience landlords willing to offer long-term rentals? Good question. So the rental market today is very different from the rental market when I first moved to Spain. I first moved to Spain 2020, start of 2020 was when I first moved to Spain. So it's obviously now as well. I've talked about this on the channel. There's like a property law that came in, which is giving more protection to renters. It's supposed to make it more accessible, but a lot of people argue that it's had the opposite effect, because landlords are simply just increasing the requirements. They're asking for more money down. They're increasing the price of rent, and because the housing supply, people argue, hasn't caught up with the demand, then they basically have to take the pick of the best tenants. So yeah, I think if you're really looking for a long-term rental, it is challenging. But like similar to what I was saying about finding a mortgage, if you can prove that you've been with a company for a long term, you have a decent income. If your income, typically the rule they look for, and it's also a good personal finance rule, is that if your monthly income is like 3 times the rent, then typically you're in a decent position, to be considered as a good applicant. And the longer you've been with a company as well, then they'll think, okay, this person has shown like stability, the ability to, consistently work and stay in that environment. So even though in practice, you might leave the company the next day, from a landlord's perspective, they'll look at that as kind of a favorable thing. So yeah. So I hope that helps. And yeah, Look on websites like Idealista, Fotocasa. These are where you can typically find longer term rentals. If you're looking for a shorter term rental, maybe medium term, I think there are some long ones as well. You can look on a website called uniplaces.com that I partner with. I'll drop the link in the chat as well. And there's a code that you can use, UA Millennials 25. If you use that code, you'll get 25% off the service fee. So Uniplaces take a service fee when you make the booking, and they don't necessarily ask. The idea with uni fees is that it's tailored for foreigners who don't want to go through like all the bureaucratic process that exists in Spain. So it can sometimes, from sharing it with another member, I've heard that their prices are a little bit higher than the market rate, so you might pay a little bit more. But from like, you know, trying to prove your salary, trying to prove that you've been long term in Spain, different kinds of, like a guarantor, for example, you're typically not going to go through that kind of hassle with the bureaucracy on that perspective. So maybe have a look at that as well. But yeah, best of luck, Karim, finding an apartment, and drop me a message if there's anything that I can do to help as well. Okay, so we got more questions. So for Renk, do you own a property in Spain? How difficult is it to get a mortgage there? So I own a property. The apartment I'm in right now is my apartment. I bought it in 2021. And how difficult is it to get a mortgage? Again, it really depends on your situation. So take in those three groups of people. So if you're a civil servant, you know, it's almost, I'm not going to say automatic approval, but it's a very, very good sign. If you've been working in a company for a long time, you have a good salary, that's also a good sign. And then it's more challenging for freelancers and autonomos, but not impossible. The good thing now is that there are some kind of aids, some different like support coming out from regional governments, from banks as well, where for younger people aged like 18 to 35. In the case of Madrid, even 40, actually, the regional president, she increased the age range from 35 to 40, where either the regional government can, you know, act as your guarantor for like the first 15% of the mortgage, or you can get some more, or you can get like a 95% mortgage in the cases of certain banks, like ones I've seen. I think Santander maybe do one, and Ibercaja like is one that I've seen as well. So it's it really depends on where you're looking, what kind of property. Like sometimes as well, like you might just have to readjust your expectations. Like certain, like your ideal property might not be the one that you can get the mortgage for today. But you know, maybe one that's, you know, a little bit less expensive, or maybe it's a similar property but it's in the outside of the city. That can maybe be an option, because that's actually how I ended up getting this property, because I moved outside of Madrid to the you know, to the suburbs. Where the property prices are cheaper. So I hope that helped for Ring. Okay, guys, I'm just going to change the battery in the camera. I'm still here. You'll still be able to hear me. You'll just see the camera and the screen go for a second. All right, so I am back now. And clearly, guys, I did not learn my lesson last time about charging the batteries. So apologies for the short interruption there. But we are back. So continuing the question. So Chinadu, someone told me about apartments that you can rent with the opportunity to buy, where the rent paid contributes to the amount of the apartment. Is this common? If you've heard about it, would you advise? I heard about it in one case. I can't remember what the company is called, but when I was looking at buying my property, there are companies that offer this. I will see what I can find and maybe consider putting it in a video, because it is a good point that you make. You know, people, particularly young people, you know, they're paying a lot of money in rent when they could be paying less for a mortgage, but because of the, you know, the access conditions to buy a house and to get a mortgage, they just can't. But there are companies that do offer this kind of model. So yes, they do exist, and have a look there. Okay. Bejan Alpha, what is considered long-term more than a year? Yeah, typically a long-term rental contract is considered more than a year. You've got a few different like rental models in Spain, like contract models. So you've got like alquiler turístico, which is like holiday short-term renting and letting, basically like your Airbnb, your holiday apartments. So these kind of contracts, I understand they can't exceed 30 days by law. And so, yeah, anything beyond that has to become what's called alquiler temporal, which is like temporary renting. And that's anywhere from, you know, 1 month up to a year. if I'm not mistaken. And now the government is trying to put a bit more control on this as well to restrict the number of like temporary rental contracts that people make to, get around the property law, because the touristic like the tourist renting and like the temporary renting, they're not subject to like the property law the same way that long-term rentals are. Um, so basically, yeah, if you are going to do one of those kind of contracts, like a temporary renting, then it needs to be justified. This is from the landlord's perspective, of course, not as like the tenant. Like the landlord is the one that needs to justify why it's not a long-term rental contract. And then yeah, you've got your long-term rental contracts, which are more than a year, and they're governed by like the new property law that came out, or yeah, came into effect last year. Okay, is uni places only for students? Now, it's common for students, but it's not only for students. Like digital nomads, like expats who, need a place to live. Medium-ish term, I think there's some long-term ones on there as well, can look on uni places. So worth having a look. The good thing as well is that they do stay with you throughout the process. So if you find something you like, uni places will they'll stay in touch right up until the point when you move in to make sure that the property it matches the description, and that it is as it says in the pictures, and that you haven't been scammed essentially. So you've got like a multilingual support team as well to keep you on track. More questions. Is there usually severe weather in Spain? I saw something about a tornado a few weekends ago. So, usual, I would say no, but I'd say over the past couple of years, it is maybe becoming more common. Like this year, for example, we went down to the south of Spain. We went to Gibraltar, drove down, like went to the south of Spain and then went to Gibraltar. And like the rain was like horrendous, like never seen, well, I had seen rain like that in my life, but just like I did not expect it to come at Easter time. Yeah, there's been flooding in Palma de Mallorca. There's now like Dana, which is a storm, which is off the coast of, I don't know if it's the Valencian region, but yeah. So like extreme weather, I would say it hasn't been common, but I am noticing more extreme weather. Like Madrid, for example, in the summer and Madrid in the winter, like the extremeness of the temperatures seems to be getting more and more as well. It seems to be getting colder in the winter and hotter in the summer as well. So a good question. But yeah, I mean, probably the best time to come to Spain in general, particularly cities like Madrid, but I'd say in general, is like, early springtime, like April to May, early June, and then September, to October, November. I say this because like it's kind of when the tourist season, the peak of the tourist season is over. You can find like good deals. The weather is good, but it's not scorching hot and it's not freezing cold. It's kind of like the sweet spot. Unless you've got allergies, in which case in springtime, like you really suffer, like I do, unfortunately. But yeah, those are probably the best times I would say to come to Spain, like both for the weather and just from a general perspective. And then you had another question as well. So I noticed a lot of folks on Spain go on vacation, mostly in the north, and there's some other websites where one can find those rentals for like 1 or 2 months. And when's the best time to look? Good question. Yes, a lot of people are now checking out like the north of Spain, like Galicia, Cantabria, Asturias, and the Basque Country. Yeah, because it's a lot cooler than the rest of the country. So if you're stuck in like 40-degree Madrid, it's really nice to go up to Galicia where it's like 25 degrees and you've got like nice cool water and an ocean breeze, and you're just enjoying that there. In terms of where to look for rentals, let me think, because yeah, Idealista and Fotocasa tend to be longer term rentals. I am pretty sure that there is like a shorter term website. Let me have a think, and if I find it, I will share it with you guys as well. Marco, you have a question. So regarding grants for buying a property, you're in that kind of scenario, you're obligated to live in the apartment you bought for a certain period, or is it allowed to rent it out? Good question. There are conditions that come with that. I think not being able to rent it out may be one of them. The property you can also only buy properties up to like a certain value as well. I can't remember what it is, but like you're not going to be able to buy like a €1 million like penthouse with a 95% mortgage in this case. I think it's, yeah, maybe somewhere on the 250, 300,000 euro mark, which is kind of the upper limit. But yeah, so there's a couple of conditions that come with those 95% mortgages. It's, yeah, best to check with the bank or with the, the regional government to understand like what the specific conditions are as well. Do rolling contracts exist in Spain? These rental contracts do not have a specified end date. So yeah, typically long-term rental contracts, like more than a year, they have like a default time period set of like 5 years or 7 years or something. So they just roll over and roll over. And then at the end of 5 years, if nobody says anything, like the tenant doesn't say anything to the landlord and the landlord doesn't say anything to the tenant, like it's kind of assumed that like the rental contract ends. But that doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean that, you have to move out. Like you can't say to the landlord, I want to stay living here, and the contract can be extended. So it's really, again, it really depends on like that's kind of the rule of thumb, but, it's always best to consult with the landlord, like what the specific situation is. Great. So guys, loads of questions there. Thank you for them all. I hope that my answers were helpful. I hope they helped to answer your questions. Now, just before I end the stream, first of all, thank you all for joining. It's always great to have so many people watching, and I'm glad to be able to help all of you as well. Remember as well that if you want to get more out of the experience with Millennials with Money, like if you want like member-specific live streams, if you're looking for, behind-the-scenes videos, these kind of things, then you can get access to them through my different membership levels. So I've got a member with money, which is kind of the basic tier. So the average cost is about €2.99 per month. Not a lot, but for that you'll essentially get, you'll get a thank you shout out in every video. I've started putting these at the end for the members. So anyone who becomes a member, you'll get a shout out at the end of all the Millennials with Money videos. You'll get access to, behind the scenes videos. So I put a video on like a couple of weeks ago for the members only, where they get to see like what a busy Saturday I had, where I was, side hustling, making content and rushing through everything because my Mac needed to go off for service. So videos like that I put on there. I'll also put on, videos of, day in the life and other behind the scenes. So you get to see them as well. You'll get to watch the Multinational Money podcast episodes without ads as well. Completely, ad free. That's both like no YouTube ads, like no like ads or like affiliate promo like in the middle of the episode as well. So you'll get that as a member with money. Yeah, and the difference, yeah, as I say, live streams, I run them for members as well. And with the member live streams, like different from this is where, you can reach out to me and you can say, Jonny, I want to know about this. Like I want to know about working in Spain, which is actually what Ferenc, one of the members who's joined this live stream, he asked me about it. And in the last member live stream, we talked about finding a job in Spain. So you can send me over, I want to hear about this, and we'll talk about it like in a members only exclusive live stream. There's also an option for you to become a member with more money. So that's the next membership tier. And you get 2 additional benefits from joining this tier. So the first is that in the Millennials with Money digital store, where I have the likes of my cost of living estimate calculator for Spain, where I have, things like the tax calculator for Spain, all these kind of things, you get them for free. You'll get an exclusive code that you can use to download these files for free, and you essentially get use for them, whenever you want. The second is if you have like a personal question, like about moving to Spain or about your situation or whatever, you can send me an email and I'll make you a dedicated video with my thoughts, with my response. With the disclaimer perhaps that, it might not be legal advice, it might not be financial advice, it might just be my opinion. But if you do want to get what I think before you go and reach out to, like a lawyer or a tax consultant or an immigration specialist or something like that, then this can be something that's really helpful for you if you're thinking of moving to Spain or wherever it may be as well. Because, I talk a lot about Spain, but, I'm international, I'm global. I'll talk about anywhere that you guys are interested in. So yeah, thank you guys. Big thank you all for joining. Hope you enjoyed the live stream. I'll see if I can get one in September, but if not, there'll definitely be one in October at some point. Members live stream will definitely be happening in September for anyone who signs up. And yeah, wish you all a great evening and see you all very soon.